Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Yeah, how you guys doing? Good? Excited? Perfect. So my name is Mario Garza. I'm a writer, producer, director from Mexico, based here in LA. I started my career in advertising as a writer, and I shot my first feature last year, which is currently in post-production. I'm very excited to be here in this panel called The Producer and Filmmaker Relationship, which I think it's one of the most important ones to have. I have to read this. One sec. Thanks for joining us. This will be an hour-long panel, and we will start with some moderated questions, followed by time for a Q&A. So get your questions ready. After the panel, we're gonna go networking at the lobby so that the festival can set up for the next session. And please silence your phones. And this panel is being recorded and photographed. Great. Perfect. So let's just start with the basic question, introducing yourselves and what got you into producing. So we start with Max. Can you do the honors?
Sure. Hey guys. Happy Sunday morning. My name is Max Handelman. I started Brownstone Productions with my wife, Elizabeth Banks, and we do film and television producing primarily on the studio level, but not exclusively. And you know, we I guess we're most known for creating the Pitch Perfect franchise, which some of you may have seen, and you know, other films like Charlie's Angels, Cocaine Bear, most recently Bottoms, which Alison had a big hand in, and then TV shows like Shrill and our Pitch Perfect show, Bumper in Berlin. So we do a variety of things. And and the question was, how did I get into this?
How do you get into? How do you get into? It's actually that's the second question. But if you're there, we can.
Should I jump into that right now?
Yeah, let's do it, and then we'll go. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try and do the very short version is I worked in finance in my 20s. Came out to LA to go to business school at UCLA. And had always after working investment banking, I worked at News Corp and Fox, and wanted to move more into the creative side of the business. My wife's career kind of really had taken off in LA, and we just decided to work together, which is in hindsight a crazy thing to do, but we did, and just started looking for material. It's kind of as simple as that, and found a few good pieces of material, and got a movie made quickly, or early, called The Surrogates, a not very good movie that we made at Disney with Bruce Willis, but that was kind of the start. And then from there kind of came Pitch Perfect and other stuff, and there we go. That's the quick version.
Thank you so much. Alison?
Hey, I'm Alison. I'm head of film at Brownstone Productions, which Max did a wonderful job of telling everyone about. So I can just jump into the second question. I got into producing. I previously to Brownstone was on the studio side. I worked at Paramount Pictures for about 9 years, and had on one hand an amazing experience working on big movies with really established filmmakers and things like that, but quickly became, well, not quickly, because I guess I was there for 9 years, but became disillusioned with being a studio executive and kind of not being able to champion and really spend quality time with filmmakers and on things that I felt super passionate about, and felt on the studio side, I was sort of a manager who was carrying out the wishes of my bosses, and I just kind of it's very hard for me to give notes with a straight face that I don't believe in. And I found that once the hard work of getting the movie was done and we were on set making the movie, all of a sudden I was the bad guy, and I wanted to be the part of the on the good guy team, really kind of fighting to get the movie made in the way that the filmmakers wanted. And so met up with Max and Liz, and really kind of shared their vision for what they wanted Brownstone to be, and types of in terms of the types of projects, and also you know, one of the things I really love about my job is that it's really important for us to like only work on things that we love, that we all kind of like collectively love, because it's so hard to get movies made, and like, it's just really demoralizing to be like working on something for years that you don't love. And so, so anyway, so I've been at Brownstone now for maybe like 8.5 years. I've sort of lost track, and it's great. Oh wait, I'm not passing this.
8 plus 9 is, okay, now we've aged you.
Yeah.
No, but I do think you said something interesting about the idea of like everyone liking you. I think, you know, when you work mostly in production, you have to like have that balance between having and doing the actual work, and, you know, being on time and like budgeting and all those things. And I feel like you're also playing a lot with like people's feelings, because this is an art form. So you do have to be really careful on how you manage it, which I think it's an art in itself.
Still, no one likes me, but
I like you. I
I'm
like
okay
you.
with you.
We
I
like you
now.
here. Alison. We like you here.
I like you.
Great. Natalie?
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Natalie. I work at Cold Iron Pictures, and Miranda's our CEO, so I will let her elaborate more about it. But I think, one, we're an independent production company, and I think similarly, we really care about all of us being passionate. Everyone at our company is completely different age, demographic, and what they love. But when all of us are really passionate about a project and love it, is I think when it just makes it so much easier to push that boulder up the hill. And it just becomes something that you're excited to work on for years, even with the ups and the downs, because it is just a project and a filmmaker and a vision that you really believe in. That's how Miranda's always led our company, and I think it's just led to some really beautiful success and also just great art being made. And to answer the producing question, as a little kid, I would just make silly movies all the time, and my friend and I applied to our first really small film festival when I think we were 12, and we had to fill out a credits section, and we fought over it so badly that it almost ended our friendship, but we ended up with her as the director and me as the producer, so it just always stuck, and I went to school for it, and I just think it blended well with my personality, so I couldn't imagine doing anything else, but also just ever since I was 12, that label was something I took to heart.
I bet you were in the credits, like all of it. Like you were, you know, the
credits
producer.
are insane. I
yeah,
was everything.
you were everything.
It's the most painful 2-minute credits where we list our names for every role ever. But I got producer, she got director, and we
And
actually.
where is she now?
She directed and then went on to be at Pixar.
Oh, okay. So she's doing
Not
well
as a
too.
director, but she went to school for directing at LMU.
Oh, that's cool.
And then I went to Chapman for producing. So
Nice.
We met
it
at
worked out.
ICM.
Yeah.
So.
And ICM led me to Miranda
Nice.
and the indie film world.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you
Yeah,
for sharing your
Natalie
story.
was the assistant to my agent, and so she always got me the best gifts.
And you rescued me.
And then she applied for a job as my assistant, and I obviously hired her. And she then started getting him the best gifts. And that's how I knew she could definitely be a producer, and then she can just do my job for me. And so I don't really produce anymore, so I don't know why I'm here. I started producing because I primarily started as an actress, and I was acting in a lot of things that I didn't like.
Yeah.
But I loved the roles, but not necessarily the projects. And so then I started being like, well, how can I be a part of projects that I like? And then that just kind of leads to producing. And then I got knocked up, and then there wasn't a lot of acting roles for me there. And so then I focused more on my producing, and then now I'm back to it all.
Now you're here.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
this can lead us to the next question, which is, what was your first experience like working with a director as a producer?
Well, that was great. Well, yes, it was great because we started a production. I started a production company back in the day. If you were a woman, you could not really start a production company, and you were an actress alone without a man to be taken seriously. So I partnered with a man that was a director, and we made our first movie called Dead and Breakfast with all of our friends, who a lot of them are really famous now. We're not friends with them anymore. and he and I aren't exactly friends either anymore, but we were for a long time. and he was a director, and I was like an actress producer, and I just kind of learned to basically, you know, every ball he would throw in the air, pick up and be able to put in place, and that's essentially what you do as a producer. If someone asks, like, what does a producer do, and the real question is, what does a producer not do? We do everything, and a lot of the creative things that you see on screen are due to producers giving notes on scripts, giving notes on edits, you know, giving notes on cast, you know, who we should cast, everything. It's not all just, but we can actually make shitty movies and make more shitty movies if we want, and good movies, whereas like a director, if you make a shitty movie,
You're done.
if you're a guy, you can make 3 shitty movies. If you're a girl, you can make maybe 1 more.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks for sharing. You want to talk about your experience?
I guess first experience with the director.
Yeah.
I'll probably do maybe my first one. I actually had like a real producing role because I worked as a production company for a long time, worked with many directors. But I think my first experience being a producer with working with the director was an incredible one, and we actually have a second movie with her as well. But I think it just is really special to be able to form like a true bond where you can be completely transparent with someone, because all you can do as a producer is be problem solving and oriented in that, and staying and keeping everyone calm and the ship moving forward. So I think directors usually have a very different personality than producers. So I think finding someone that you can really complement each other and be the yin to the yang, and be that person that they call with any type of emergency, and feel that they can be completely open and honest with you, is always an incredible experience. I don't think I've had any bad experiences.
You're lucky.
but,
That's great.
Yeah,
she's forgotten them.
They're in the past.
but we also work with a lot of just really talented female directors.
Nice.
And I think, you know, since it is such a, as you mentioned, like intimate experience where you work with someone for years, it's so important to just get along very well at a core level. So yes, there's definitely probably some trickier personalities. But I think my first experience with someone where I was a producer has been a really special one.
That's awesome. And I also remember, Alison, that this week in another panel you said that it boiled down to if you like the person. Like, it's all these things, but it's also like, do you like working with that person? Do you get along with them? Are they funny? Are they interesting? Are they smart? So do you have, like, what was your experience working the first time that you were producing with a director? Did you like the director? Did you had a good experience? Did you learn a lot of things?
Yeah, I mean, I would say on Bottoms, definitely, I like Emma a lot, and I think, you know, it's important just because you spend so much time with this person, and like, you do have to be able to, you know, disagree and like challenge each other, and if like, you know, it's not coming from a place of kind of like mutual respect and like ultimate like of the person, it can be really difficult. And I think like there were definitely so many moments where like, you know, I'm sure we both were frustrated, but because our relationship was built on like, you know, I think a strong mutual respect, like we were able to have these, you know, I don't even want to call them arguments, but we were able to kind of like get into the thick of it with each other and kind of like, you know, in the most productive way possible. But I think like the respect is kind of like a big one, because you're not always going to disagree. You're not always going to agree with someone. And, you know, at a certain point, like the director is the director of the movie, you know? And so as a producer, like you have to take a little bit of a step back, even if you believe, you know, in a certain thing. Yeah. But like, if you know, have this sort of mutual, you know, if it's built on this mutual respect, like you're kind of like, it just comes from, I think, like a place where it's all about the good of the movie at the end of the day, and it doesn't become personal and sort of like, you know, petty.
Yeah, like how can you make the best movie?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you guys, I wonder if you guys have any like pet peeves from filmmakers that you're like, that's a big no-no, or, you know, anything that, I mean, I guess this question is for everyone. If there's any pet peeves that you feel like, you know, you've dealt with in the past in a way, or, you know,
I mean,
whether they're funny or not.
Well, they can lead to funny results. No, I mean, my biggest pet peeve with any filmmaker, and this is true about kind of everyone in general, but filmmakers are often in a unique position where they are like they are the vision, right? And as a producer, to some degree, your job is to service the vision and support the vision of the director. But my biggest pet peeve is just directors who will just shut down conversation or debate about a given issue, just like, I don't want to hear about it, and either physically or kind of metaphorically kind of walk away. And you're like, well, we can't, we got to have a conversation about this. And sometimes as a producer, you're, servicing a message from the studio, let's say. And so you're like, this is not even something I necessarily feel strongly about, but we have to talk about it so I can tell the studio that we had this conversation, because they want to know that their note or their thought or their concern was
finding a
really,
solution, basically,
yeah,
to whatever problem
yeah.
it is.
And it's often, not always, but it's often a lot of directors, particularly new directors, instinct is just to kind of like insulate themselves and shut down conversation. I don't want to hear about it. This is my vision. This is what I think. And you're like, okay, but that's not an answer that I can give to the investors or the financiers or the studio. Like, there are other people who are part of this conversation.
Do you think that's directors like trying just to protect their art, or they don't have enough experience, or what do you think it is when it comes to?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it varies. I think it varies from filmmaker to filmmaker. I think it varies from the situation. But very often, particularly people who are new to it, yeah, they're kind of, well, they're just looking to protect themselves.
Yeah.
They may not have an answer, but they know, like, well, this is my vision. I have to do it this way, and da-da-da-da-da. And you're like, I understand that, but again, we have to have a conversation.
Yeah. Anybody else with pet peeves from filmmakers that want to share?
That's, by the way, that's a general.
Yeah, that's a very.
I can give.
I want to
Specific
hear
pet
some
peeve I have with
funny
my
ones.
husband.
Specific ones, but I don't.
That was a really
out
good
people.
one to start. Yeah. Is there any other like funny ones, or just like, or that you? Yeah.
I think one pet peeve I have is just someone who doesn't tell you about problems when they're smaller, and then they just tend to compound. So I think filmmakers who might know that maybe something on a shoot is going to be really tricky, or like cause issues, but they don't want to mention it because then they're worried you'll shut it down from the beginning instead of figuring out a way to do it safely and in the best possible way. So I think just that is my pet peeve, is if you're on a shoot and all of a sudden something comes up and they're trying to do something that as a producer you don't think is the best idea or overall could just be done in a better way or is problematic. That's definitely my pet peeve, because then it's just a bigger problem to deal
And
with.
you could have solved it, in the beginning,
solve from
instead
the
of like
beginning, yeah,
snowballing.
exactly.
I'd say mine is in post-production, mostly when you're giving editing notes and the editor and the director will be like, well, that's impossible.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, did you try it? And they're like, well, we don't have the footage. I'm like, I was there. I saw us shoot the footage. So, and they will just be like, no, we can't.
Yeah.
And then inevitably the producer's going to go in and we're going to make it happen. And it's really great when someone's like, yes, I tried that. Here it is. So you can see that doesn't work as well as this. And I think as someone who's also directed documentaries and there's so much you can do with molding a story in the editing room. And any director who does not want to collaborate with their editor or their editor's assistant or their producers or the studios, I don't think is a very good director. I think that you have to have a vision, but no movie is one person's vision. It just, unless you're Steven Soderbergh, I guess. But it just really isn't.
Yeah. Nice. Do you think that comes from inexperience with direct impose?
Yes,
like this
insecurity.
question,
I think
it's-
it comes from insecurity.
Yeah, because I think I think ideally you show the version that maybe the producer's like, let's go with this, and then you're like, well, I have a good justification for this, why this other thing works better. Do you think that comes with experience for directors that?
No, I think I don't think you'll ever have enough experience. I think the question is knowing that you don't have experience, even no matter what experience you have.
Yeah.
Martin Scorsese or whoever, is always learning. I think we're all, you can always I love notes personally. Like I love them because even if I'm like, that's the oh my God, that was a good note. You know,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah.
as long as you try it,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised.
Yeah. Nice. Great.
Yep.
Anybody else? Any pet peeves, Alison, maybe, that you...
No, I didn't really have a pet peeve. I was just going to say, like, I think sort of cribbing off of a little bit what Max said, like, a lot of it's a personality type. Like, I have sort of, like, the reverse of a pet peeve, which is, like, I've been in meetings with directors who have, like, just, like, given this amazing meeting that they're so collaborative, they're going to, like, take every note, and then, like, they're like, I'm not doing any of that. Like, that was just... which I'm like...
Those are salesmen, yes. those
Yeah,
are-
okay, like, you know, like, respect.
Yeah.
That was a good...
Oh, wait, there's another pet peeve is for me for pitches on TV and stuff is, you know, you come up with this great pitch and the director and writers, you know, are going to go and they're going to do it and they just suck in a room. And like us as producers are like, we could give the best pitch right now, but we can't because it's supposed to be the writer director. But they're just like, yeah.
Do you
so-
think it's because they're maybe nervous?
No, I think
Like-
they have no personality sometimes.
Well,
Yeah.
I will also say the thing that actually is my pet peeve that drives me crazy is when you have a great meeting with a director, but then the next meeting is, you know, with the head of the studio or someone who like really is the ultimate audience for this thing.
Yeah.
And because they've already done the meeting like with you, they just don't bring the same
Excitement.
enthusiasm. Like you can
Yeah.
tell they're like apologetic that they're repeating themselves, you know,
Yeah.
and like you sit there sort of cringing that like you know there's a better version of this pitch that like is just not coming across and you can
Right.
feel the room. That drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that leads me to the next question, which is, you know, what advice do you have for directors and how they work with producers? Like, what's your ideal director when it comes to communication? Max, do you have any?
Well, I'm biased because I worked a lot with my wife, who's a great director to work with. But I will say, just again, recognizing my own personal bias. But Elizabeth is a very good example of, as a director, she's. I mean, I think Alison would agree. You know, Elizabeth is incredibly decisive. She's highly organized, incredibly decisive. But at the same time, you can absolutely have conversations and be collaborative as long as you kind of have your shit together and like you can articulate a cogent or coherent point. but yeah, it's the decisiveness that is fantastic. And you know, a director is leading an entire crew. And everyone has to understand, you know, the fundamental vision and believe that that director has command of his or her vision and can execute it. So,
Yeah, so the decision making basically, because when you're
Yeah.
shooting for 16 hours straight and you have to decide, you know, where to put the camera, everyone's tired, everyone's, you know, they don't want to be there for, you know,
Yeah.
because they've been working so much. You want someone that can be like, let's do this in 2 minutes, it's going to be great, instead of like freaking out or freezing or like, I don't know what to do. And yeah, I think that's a skill that you can practice as a director, I guess.
yeah. And I forget your exact question, but so what was? Repeat the
I guess
question.
the question was, you know, what advice do you have for directors and how they work and communicate with producers? Like,
Yeah,
what's your idea?
you know, I was going to, on the flip side, I think advice I would have for directors, which of course, again, you have to have a certain amount of self-awareness and to do this, but, you know, unless you're Spielberg or, you know, whomever, of the elite directors, like, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. It's just a natural thing. We all do. And, you know, most directors have certain, you know, have strengths and certain weaknesses, whether it's, for instance, like, I can think of one case in particular, like, some directors just have a total blind spot for casting, which you wouldn't think. You'd be like, oh, yeah, this guy's a director, like, you know, he or she wants to cast their film, and they've dreamed about, you know, actors for these specific roles. But I've been surprised in certain cases, directors like, yeah, I don't know, like, and they just kind of defer either to the casting director. They don't really have a strong opinion, but then at the same time they will, you know, be insecure about that, and so they will kind of overcompensate and get very kind of, you know, obstinate about what they do or don't want, and so that's frustrating. Other directors aren't strong with music. you'd be surprised when you're trying to, you're talking about needle drops or what have you, and just directors like, nah, you know, and you know, your music supervisors are pitching songs, and they're like, nah, I don't know. And you're like, what? How do you not know? But anyways, just having that, you know, self-awareness to know, like, you know what, I don't know music. Like, you know, I need help here,
Right.
and I want, you know, everyone's perspective or however that works.
It kind of made me think of like if any, and this question is for everyone here, if you can choose one stage where the director could be great and maybe in the other ones not so great. For example, great at music, great in the development, like the actual like writing if it's a writer, or in the casting. Like what would you choose if you can only choose one? I know that might be impossible, but
Cake or pie, is that what you're saying?
yeah, I mean, you know, do you want them to be really good at music? Do you prefer them to be really good in casting? And is there anything that you
I
do
just
that-
prefer the script to be good and them to not be afraid to express their self of what they want. But, oh God, what was the first question
Well,
that you had?
the question is, what advice do you have
Oh yeah,
for directors?
here's the thing, prepare. Prepare, make a shot list, make a plan. It'll most likely won't work out. Be ready for plan B, which also won't work out, and be ready to pivot on that plan.
Yeah.
But you have to plan, and if you don't plan, then it shows to everybody, like the cast, the crew, the producers, and then it's very hard to hold respect once people realize you do not have a plan. Whether your plan sucks or not, it's okay, let it. But just, you know, have one.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say prep.
Double downing on that.
Yeah, totally preparing for
Give me a director who is confident and competent and prepared and goes through prep in a organized and efficient way, and they are prepared. Exactly to your point, they will establish respect with the crew, with the cast, and it all kind of ripples out from there. And conversely, if you don't have that, you're just behind.
I
the eight ball
wonder
all
if
the time.
you ever had a director that's, because, you know, from personal experience, you could be really prepared. You could have done all the storyboards, everything, and then you get there on set, and
Well, that
there's-
happens every time.
And there's a parade, and you can shoot, and you're shooting in a church, and it's closed. Like, there's so many things. So I wonder if you ever experienced, any of you, a director, a situation where you're preparing everything, and then the day on set, it's not going as planned, and the director just either freezes or can't really deal. Like, because you can also have that.
I had a director, well, I was an actor on a movie.
Yeah.
And the director in Africa, and the director got so mad at the other lead actress who had walked off set. So I ran to go get that other actress, brought her on set, and then that director walked off set. And then I prepped the scene for the director
wow.
and rehearsed with the actor. And then the producers came and were like, can you go get her to come back on set and do her job? So yes, it can go badly.
It can go bad ways, yeah. Alison, do you have any experience?
No, I think like, you know, that's what happens like a lot.
That's
I
mainly
mean-
mainly what happens, which I think is interesting, that you're prepared for things that you don't know how it's gonna go, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think like ultimately, like if the director knows kind of like the true north and sort of like what they need to get out of a scene, then you also, you know, you need to prepare as well. But like you can sort of pivot and you can make accommodations. You can know what to cut, you know, like because you know at the end of the day it would be great to get these things, but ultimately like I need to get these things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sometimes your 3 setups turn into one, you know.
Yeah.
And I would just say if that happens, just make sure to have the DP grab another like still shot of something that you can cut to if you have to run into one, or in case you have 3 takes that half of the take is good and the other half is bad, and then vice versa. So you have like one, oh, someone looks at their watch, some insert.
No, I think you brought something interesting with the DPs, because I do think that you definitely need to have some, you need to be able to be prepared for them, prepare if you're a DP as well. Like, hey, we cannot shoot this, shoot whatever you can in the time that, even if you have 2 minutes, just shoot anything, because in the editing room, everyone's going to really appreciate that other shot,
Yeah.
even if you don't have the one that you want.
I think most line producers now are aware, and I think especially since digital, you know, like we steal and grab a bunch of, you know, exteriors and a bunch of just, you know, just while we're setting up or, you know, rehearsing, go ahead and grab some stuff around the room and whatnot, just in case. It's very helpful to have that extra, I forget what it's called.
B-roll.
Yeah, but B cam.
Yeah, like a
Even
B
though
cam.
you only have an A cam, get B cam.
I
Yeah.
wish there was always a B cam rolling, just
Sometimes
anything,
that-
anywhere.
yeah.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Um,
Expensive, but nice.
Very expensive. Great. Why don't we go to the next question? What do you look for in a filmmaker that you're beginning a working relationship with? Maybe Natalie, you want to?
I would say passion and vision. To everyone's point too, that you need someone who is opinionated because they're the one really leading the story. And a lot of projects we work on are directors and writers. So I think someone that has the vision and can truly see the world and the character is the type of person that inspires passion in everyone else, because you need someone who is opinionated and decisive, obviously not to the fault of not being able to collaborate, but someone who really does have a vision and a reason that they're telling this story, I think is the best type of person to work with, because you know it's going to be a hard battle and they're not going to give up. So someone who really wants to prove that they can make it and has a reason for making the movie, I think usually is the best person to work with.
Nice. Alison, you have a...
I mean, I always get really excited by directors who can, either read someone else's script or talk about their script in a way that completely elevates it from anything that I ever imagined. I think that everyone, I read a script and I have a certain idea in my mind of what it's going to look like and feel like and all that. And sometimes you meet with a director who's just no, this is how I see it. And it's just it is the script, but it's just this totally kind of elevated, different version of what you thought it was, and they're taking scenes and making them better in the way that they're talking about how they're going to direct them than you see on the page there. And I see this a lot of times when we bring directors in to pitch on scripts that we've developed, where a lot of them kind of are just they're not telling you anything that's not there, and then you meet with that one director who's just totally takes it in a similar but different direction. And that I find...
In terms of story, in terms of design, in terms of visual, music, what
all
are
of
those?
it.
All of it.
All of it,
They start painting the picture in a different way that you are attracted to.
Yeah, and they have something, in terms of story, there's something that they, to your point, that they connect to, but that they're going to bring alive in a way that's not there on the page. I look to directors to tell me what is not on the page, and not everyone, does that.
What about you, Max?
I would say two words, in addition to what has already been said, which I agree with. The first word, and maybe the most important word, is tone. I'm always looking for directors who have that incredibly strong grasp of the specific tone of the material that they want to make, and understand what that tone is, because and I think we're seeing it more and more in theatrical releases these days. Tone is everything, and it's what makes films distinct. And if you don't understand the tone of the film you're attempting to make, and you're off 10 degrees one way or the other, the film just becomes something very different, and I think works a lot less. So I would say tone. And then by extension, directors just really have a strong command of the themes of the material. Why does this movie matter? Why should it be made? And that can be at the smallest level or at big, studio level. I mean, I suspect most people in here have seen Barbie and have varying opinions of Barbie. But, I think there's any number of reasons why that film succeeded the way it did, but I think two very specific reasons were the tone. Greta just had a perfect grasp of the tone. Whether it happened in post or during production, we'll never, or both. I guess we'll never know. But it happened, and that was the vision of her vision. She just executed that, and then that film had themes that she clearly had contemplated and thought about, and it was executed in the film. That's why that film mattered above and beyond just Ryan Gosling being badass. you know, which he was.
What do you like to see when you, I think tone it's a great, it's very important. What do you like to see when people are pitching your projects when it comes to tone? Do they show you like these movies, Barbie meets whatever? Do they show you links with music? It's a mood boards. Like, what do you? Because it's. I mean, it could be anything. Like tone, you could be like, oh, have you seen this episode of this? Like, it's basically this in a movie. Like, in your experience, what's that thing that? What's that example of people showing you tone in a way that you're like, wow, like that's a good way of like painting the picture.
Great question. You know, it frankly is any number of the things you just mentioned, but specifically the thing that will often get me to really respond to a filmmaker when they're pitching or discussing their project is when they identify a scene and they say, it's kind of to Alison's point, where it's like this is what's on the page, this is the scene that's written, and it's often a scene that on paper is already funny. You're like, you know, in a comedic way, of course, and they say, yeah, for this, like, this is funny and this is funny, but what would be really funny is to like do this and twist it around, and that, you know, and I mean, you know, in Cocaine Bear, I don't know how many people saw Cocaine Bear, but the entire sequence that starts in the ranger center, the cabin, and then proceeds out into the ambulance chase.
Yeah, it's so,
you know,
so good.
That was written by our fantastic writer Jimmy, but that was not what was shot, and that was Elizabeth just understanding, like, okay, you know, like, so this guy's gonna get shot in the head and he's gonna fall over, and then, you know, we're gonna have, you know, the ambulance is gonna be playing this 80s music, and they get out, and just like every sequence. And so she just could articulate. That was like one of the first scenes she really talked about when she was getting invested in the film, and I think it paid off. But it's that kind of stuff. You know, in Pitch Perfect 2, you know, we had the riff off in Pitch Perfect 2, which was just, you know, like, riff offs are in every Pitch Perfect movie, for better or for worse. But I mean, you know, the fans love riff offs. I love riff. I think they're amazing. But I mean, whenever you read a riff off in a Pitch Perfect script, it's like, yeah, they kind of hear and they sing some songs, and this is the song, and da 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 da, and, you know, it's not really
The basic of
yeah,
what it is, but
yeah. Because it just, and we always say to writers, so we always have this conversation, like, don't spend a lot of time like obsessing about the songs, because it's all going to change, because we can't clear half of these songs and all this kind of stuff. But like, you know, in Pitch Perfect 2, it was just like, okay, so this is a scene, but, you know, we're going to have David Cross come out and like wearing a robe, and he's got like, you know, My Pretty Ponies, and he's going to have a guy over here who's like hitting a gong, and then we're going to have the Green Bay Packers show. Like, it's just like, these are all things that we kind of, you know, were dreaming up, but it was just tone. It's like, you have a riff off. Riff offs are awesome, and the fans love riff offs. But like, what would be really crazy is if you had the offensive line from an NFL team participate, because that would be stupid. Like, why would you do that? And that's why.
It
that's why
actually
it's
reminds
great.
me, like, this festival is Proof of Concept Film Festival, which I think it's very important to have one of these festivals to like really show tone and theme and all of this. I wonder if you guys have ever seen a proof of concept from a filmmaker that it's like, you know, either they shot or they just made a montage of things and it really portrayed the tone or the theme, and you were, even if it's as small as a TikTok video to like, you know, a 20.
Daniels. I mean, we did Swiss Army Man, which was their first movie. Yeah. And we all know what happened to their second movie. Where's our thank you? I forgot. But, you know,
You produced the wrong movie is what you're saying.
I produced the right one. I think that, you know, I greenlit that with us before even meeting them or even reading the script, based on their music video. And just the idea turned out for what?
Yeah. That's
because then I was like, well, whatever they've written here, which makes absolutely no sense, is clearly going to make sense because they made sense in this.
Yeah.
And then we developed the script with them longer and got it, and they pulled it off. But that's the only time, you know what? But did James Gunn in Super, he really knew what he was doing. But back then, you know, we didn't have nearly the kind of technology that we have now. Yeah. That's where music kind of comes in, and his tone had a lot to do with music. And that was great, knowing him. I mean, for me, I don't really know how to answer that question about like what makes what are you looking for a director? Because for me, it's always like a gut feeling.
It's like you see something
I
that
talk
you like,
to someone,
and,
or I
yeah.
or I hear something, and it's either like I either feel like yes, or I feel like no. And I know that's super weird, but that's just the way it is.
No, but I think it's what Alison you mentioned this week too. It's like it's a matter of like whether you like the person, you like the idea, and you want to have a relationship with them for 2 years, 10 years, or 30 years, or one day, maybe.
Or marry them.
Uh,
I did, actually.
Oh yeah.
Well, when I was working at Paramount,
Oh, wait.
to answer your previous question, we got the script like 5 times. That I literally passed on the script like 5 times. It was like a time travel movie, and sort of like felt kind of young. And then this agent was like, just meet with the director and just like hear what he has to say. And so I met with him, and he had went out and he had shot like a
Like a
little
proof of
piece
concept,
on
yeah.
his iPhone with friends in his apartment, and it, tonally was like so different than I had ever imagined the movie being. It felt kind of like cool and edgy and like done in your basement, like, and it was like, oh, this is what this movie is, and kind of like went into work the next day and was like, you guys, I know we've passed on this movie 5 times, but like, watch this piece, and everyone was just like, yeah, this is what the movie is. I mean, it was always like a good commercial idea for a movie, and the movie got made, and
you married
I
him?
did marry the director.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
good. Nice.
Yeah, that is a really good ending.
Yeah.
I passed on my husband 5 times too.
It happens. It happens. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, which I do want to do it, which is, can you tell us about a time where you learned something new about the producer and filmmaker relationship? Like, what's the latest thing you learned about this relationship that, you probably have yearly with filmmakers that maybe you didn't have 2 years ago?
Someone else go.
Don't do it. I don't know.
Say it.
Everything's different. Every project's different. Every person's different. Everything is different. You're always learning something different. You're always learning about your own faults too, and like I think my biggest lesson, which I've had to learn too many times, and I hopefully won't again, but I probably will screw it up again, is thinking someone else will deal with this problem that I see, because we have a lot of producers on this. So I'll just mention it to the producers, and someone else will bring it up to the director and fix it. And then they don't.
And then you have to
And then
fix it.
it never gets fixed. And then it's just stuck. And it's your fault, because not only did you know, like, you knew they weren't going to do it, but neither did you.
Yeah.
You also can't change someone. I think it's true for any personality that you work with, but I think even just like getting to know your director really well and accepting their faults, as much as they might frustrate you, the nice thing is in our work, we're not managers, so there always comes an end time to working with someone. So I think just
Well,
sometimes.
yeah, sometimes.
If you're lucky.
No, not if you're lucky. Not. I'm joking, Alex.
But yeah, I think just sometimes accepting it and being as kind and helpful as you can with some small boundaries, but just accepting you can't change people, but there is an end of the road eventually.
Yeah. Nice. Any?
I agree with what's been said.
Great.
Sorry, the air conditioning is making my nose just run. I feel like I'm Cocaine Bear right now.
Why don't we start with Q&A? If anybody, we have a mic over here, so people can come into the mic and have ask some questions to these amazing people here. Turn it.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay.
You're not that far.
My question is about the producer's job once an independent film specifically is finished or at least picture locked. Besides festivals, what is the best way for the producer to get a movie seen by people who might want to buy it and or release it? And this can be like general or like specific to your companies.
I do think applying to a festival is really just the best way to get the film out there. There are sales agents, of course, but I think just being able to have a festival and to create some sort of buzz, and there's so many varieties of festivals. There's not just the Cannes or the Sundance. There are 1,000 other festivals. So I think that really is the best route for films. And then from there, getting sales agents on board, because they're really the ones that will champion your film and get it out there. And producers can do a lot to help nudge along the way and get it in the right hands. But I just would double down on festivals are the best route for independent film.
Yeah, and I think lawyers, once you're in your discussion of selling a film, and you know, it's very challenging to sell a film for more money than you made it for, or even a quarter of that. But you know, think about what you're giving away, because a lot of times there's companies that will take your film for no MG, but they'll also own it for 23 years, and they won't put any P&A in it. And so basically it's up to you and the filmmakers and the producers. And I have always been a proactive producer. So, I mean, right now we have a movie, Unknown Country, with Lily Gladstone. We have so many Lilies, just so you know. But Lily Gladstone, and she's coming out this weekend in Martin Scorsese's movie. But we're still pushing, you know, out on our social media as producers, Unknown Country, that is now on VOD. And it's like just about, you know, you just don't stop, you know, pushing your own work out there in order to get people to see it, because otherwise, what's the point of making it?
It's true.
Anybody else? Who else wants to come in and ask a question? No
Great.
one?
See ya.
Thank you so much for coming. You mentioned something earlier, give me a moment, where producer-director relationships and how some directors have personalities and don't, and it got me thinking about a lot of the filmmakers out there, be it from like the 70s or 80s or even current now, that have those personalities, and then those that don't. And so I'm wondering, have you ever had relationships where you're doing a little bit more championing than what the director themselves can? And how often do you see that? One of the filmmakers I think of often is Todd Solondz. If you ever met him in person, he's an odd duck, but he's got a very strong singular vision of things. And you always wonder, like, I wonder how those pitch meetings go. Of do you as the exec on the other side of the table, are they buying into that, or is there that speaking voice that talks for them in those situations? Have you ever?
I've never been in a meeting with Todd Solondz, but I did read an article that where he talked about, like, I don't think he makes a lot of, like, I don't know, I mean, wasn't it 20 years or something like that since his last movie? Like,
Yeah.
I have, like, what's that, does he want to make movie? Is he not make one because he didn't want to? Do he want to spend time with his family? Does he have other interests, you know? Like, I don't know.
He was like kind of the beginning of the indie film. Like you, when you say the word personality, I think you're talking about vision, like having their own
Like
voice,
quirky.
cinematic voice. Yes.
Yes.
So and that's what really distinguishes the directors, like the Noah Baumbachs, from the James Gunns, from the Daniels to the Murray. Like they're all very different. They have their own distinct creative stamp of personality on screen, but not necessarily in the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, really what it is it's like your movies, your short films, or your feature, or your doc, or whatever. That's your personality. Mm-hmm. So if you can't display it in the room, which who can? You know, I'm much better in a room probably than I am on screen, but I don't know. But you know, it's just. You gotta make it first, I think, if you're trying to show what your creative vision is.
Understood. Thank you so much.
I would just add that, like, I do think coming prepared with a presentation, like, can make up for people not being the most dynamic in a room. You know, if you are able to put together a deck that shows, you know, what you're thinking about cast and music and production design and location and sort of mood and tone and all that, like, and that is impressive, and what you're saying is impressive. I don't think people need to be the most kind of, like, you know, show man or womany, like, in the room, because hopefully the work will speak for itself.
I think also to that point, even practicing, and I think a lot of times directors or different people might be either quirky or most people aren't, press trained. They might ramble on. So I think just also having a good relationship where you can practice with your director, like you mentioned, and just help them prepare for meetings. Because I think that is to everyone's benefit, or help them practice for publicity and say, let's make you a quick quote sheet and let's practice it so that we're not, excessively rambling or mentioning things we don't want to mention. So I think just practicing and being that person to help someone be prepared is always really helpful as a producer.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.
Hi, I wanted to ask about multi-hyphenates. There's a lot of directors who like to produce their own work. There's a lot of actors who like to be involved in producing their own work. So if a filmmaker is involved with you on a producer standpoint, how does that change your relationship with them as well?
I mean, I think we all work with multi-hyphenates. You're Elizabeth, and then we worked with Mike Birbiglia, Lake Bell, wrote, direct, starred in their movies.
Julian, a lot of our,
Yeah,
especially I think because a lot of our films are people who have written and it's their first feature. A lot of times they're very hands-on and take a producer role. It is usually a director-producer. It depends on the person, but is a little different than a day-and-date producer. So I think there also just is that difference where when they're on set, they're first and foremost the director. I think they can have a mind for producing and be brought into different conversations so that they have more of the scope. But I do still think it is kind of depends on where you're at in the process, what their main role at that time is, because you can have a producer mindset, but still, if you're on set, you're first and foremost the director.
Yeah, it's kind of like TV a little bit now that we're into TV, like a showrunner. Who's you're running the show, even though you're in the show and you wrote the show and you are directing some of the show. You're a showrunner, and hopefully you have people like Natalie to help you.
And I also, something to add to this question too is I think I couldn't imagine, and I wonder, for example, filmmakers are not producing their, for example, you're producing, but like myself, I'm a writer, producer, director, at least in my first feature, and in the other ones I kind of want to stay and do the same things. Is there a difference where you see in directors that are not producing, do they just kind of step completely away from the day-to-day, how do they do it? I wonder, I would be jealous of not being able to produce, because I want to be involved in the things that I'm writing and making sure that the directing is happening and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I exactly understand, but I think part of it depends on the scale and scope of the film that you're talking about. So just as a personal example, Elizabeth, who is an actor, director, producer, on Cocaine Bear, we had a number of conversations that weren't just between the two of us, but it was a larger group conversation about whether Elizabeth might star in the movie as well. And I think that there was a lot of perspectives on that, but ultimately the decision was made that would be best for her from a directing standpoint if she was just able to focus purely on the directing as well as the producing, in large part because there was so much technical and VFX work with creating the Cocaine Bear. That I think there was a legitimate concern that I had, that other people had, that it just would be too much of a burden to also be in hair and makeup at 4 a.m. and then have to go back to your shot list and then be talking to the VFX supervisor about what right. It just gets overwhelming. And so I think these are always kind of challenging conversations to have. Very often directors want to do everything and they want to be involved in everything. It's just kind of the nature of it. So sometimes just having a realistic sense of what are we trying to achieve here, and what are the challenges that we're facing. Smaller indie, obviously it is that's a more manageable task.
Right.
Another distinction that I would point out between male and female directors who are looking to act, in this case, you know, a lot of actors, male actors, can just kind of like roll out and go spend, you know, whatever, 20 minutes in hair and makeup and they're ready to go. Like, that's not the case for a lot of actresses who, you know, have several hours in the chair and that kind of thing. And so
Right.
it just adds up over the course of a film. That's less and less.
It's about focusing the work and just on the things
Yeah.
that you can manage.
Yeah, so you just have to be realistic and aware of kind of what you're talking about doing.
Nice. Cool. Go ahead.
Hi, Mel with Impact Pictures. First of all, thank you. My question is, I have an original story, biopic. I started off as a feature. I'm not a writer, so I commissioned the script. And then I realized after the script was finished, there's so much content here, then an entire series came and I got it all. So my question is, when you're looking at an original story, what tips the scale for you between a feature and a series, especially in our current landscape with everything happening, post-COVID, strike, et cetera? Like, how would you look at that and to determine which route is the better choice to go with, especially if I'm really strong on both, because I love film, but I have so much I want to say about this person that I could easily see 4 to 5 series or 4 to 5 seasons.
Well, that's what it is right there. It's like what happens after season 1, you know, and if you can, you know, because we have books and stuff like that and creative, I totally know how you feel. And I've realized I've started making films and going, oh, this is a series, or I started making a series and going, oh shit, this is a film. But if you can see 4 or 5 seasons, then it's possibly a series. It's just a very, very different way to go about getting made stuff. It's much easier. Independent television is very new. So if you're going to sell it, you need to have, you know, attach a well-known showrunner or a star or a director or a writer that's well-known and already has a relationship with the studio. It's very different than just having a movie that you can independently get made. But you can do it, because we did. So if we can do it, so can you.
I'm actually looking to partner, so I actually wouldn't. I would like to have a partnership as not doing it myself. So I should have said that at the beginning.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just had one question. How do you convince filmmakers when you, like, new directors, writers who they don't believe that they should write to budget, but then you tell them I can only raise 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 million for this first feature, and they still say I need $25 million to make this movie
For their first feature,
for their first feature, and
I would not work with that person.
That's very smart. Yeah.
But how? Because they're always saying, oh, if you were
They don't know what they're talking about.
That's true. Okay, well, because a lot
Budget below the line, okay, and then you can make anything below the line for $3 million. Anything. I think.
I think too, you could also have someone that maybe has budgeting experience take a look at the script, because there are always ways to tweak things and make it lower budget. Obviously, it's very different based on genre. Is it a sci-fi? But to Miranda's point, you can make things lower budget. So someone probably who has experience, like a line producer, someone who has done budgeting, I would have them look at it, and they can probably weigh in a little better of, okay, shoot in Georgia, shoot in New Jersey, use the tax credit, and tweak these things. This is the most expensive set. Because there's always ways to pull back, but I do think if someone is reaching for $25 million for their first film, depends on what it is, but if it's an indie, that is very tricky.
Because I'm a line producer by training, and I also produce, and so I'm telling this first-time writer, producer, director, you can't make something that's set in the 1980s New York City for, you know, $100,000.
No, but you can make it for 1.5.
Yeah. you can-
Squid and the
yeah.
Whale was made for 1.5. Diary of a Teenage Girl was made for 1.5. Those are all period pieces in cities. Nobody knows it. They don't look like it. You know, we made which was
Well, I think it depends
God's
on also-
Country, Tandaway Newton.
Yeah, I think
$2
there's
million.
ways to also rewrite a script to just make it more contained. But I think just having a conversation where maybe you sit down with them and explain what adds value on the screen, what is just expensive, and trying to contain it more, That way, there's just less pieces that need to be period, because a lot of picture cars is going to add up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
In New York
I was gonna
City.
say, yeah. Put it on the inside, interior.
But
Or maybe,
I
maybe
also-
this should be their second movie, and
Yeah,
like
very
they
true.
should go make an
Exactly.
awesome first
Yeah.
movie for less money, and then it's gonna be awesome
Yeah.
because this person sounds like they think they're awesome, and then people are gonna give them $25 million for their
Yeah,
second
and
movie.
have them show you on their iPhone what they mean, and then marry them.
No, but I do want to say something to that. You said he was a writer, producer, director, like the one that you're working with.
Yeah.
I think one, and here's why I relate to that person, is because my first feature, I shot it with $200,000, and it's a period piece, and it's in Spain, and I didn't know anybody there. And yes, you're right. You can wait for your second feature to be that $10 million film, or you could be smart. You can contain the film and just shoot it in one place, making it look like it's 20 different places, and be creative and still make the movie. So I think if this person is a writer, producer, director, he needs to use those three skills to not just be like, yeah, I wrote this thing and I want to direct it. It's like, how can your mind produce this thing in order for you to make it? Because I think you can make a beautiful movie with that money, but you have to contain it and be smart about it. Just want to say that, throw it out there.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. I'm so short. Thank you guys all for coming and being here. You're very fun. I don't forgive me if you've already asked this. I came in a little bit late. Answered these questions, but two questions. One, do you recommend a written contract between the director and the producer? And the second question, what percentage of the film do producers usually ask for? I'm thinking depends on the film, but what could be a average ask?
Oh, you mean in terms of back end?
Yeah, so like you get paid to do the work, right? And then after that, out of the net, after everybody's paid back, whatever.
Are you
profit
asking
is-
as a producer or as a director?
In this one, I'm asking as a director. I'm a producer as well, though. But I'm asking.
So you're looking to bring on a producer, and you want to know if you need a contract with that person?
Yeah, they want a contract. I just want to know, is that pretty much?
You could do a shopping agreement. I could say. That would be my
I
recommendation,
think
because you can get it back if they don't set
It
it up.
depends what they're bringing to the table. There have definitely been people who have had not the best experiences having producers very early on who come in, have you sign a contract, don't help, and then tend to disappear. So I think it just is more so the rapport with the person and what they're going to bring to the table. Are they actually going to see things through? It absolutely makes sense to have contracts at some point. If you're a production company like us, we only get involved when there are contracts. But that's also because you can trust that we're going to bring something to the table and help get it made. So I think it just depends on each person and what they're going to bring to the table. And then
But remember there was that one guy on that one project that we tried to get him to sign a contract because he
Yes.
wanted it, but he never did.
well, he didn't want to sign a contract as leverage.
I know, but it was so weird because it's just like, it was
Yeah,
strange.
it was a
But
leverage thing,
but I would want, as a producer, if I'm going to be taking your project out, I don't want to take it out, set it up, and then have you bring in your friend and me get kicked out, which can happen. So that's why a shopping agreement, if I'm not optioning it from you, right? So there's money thing, there's an option, you can do that. And
Shopping's good because it has a timeline on it
and
too.
they both
Yeah.
kind of do, but shopping you can just do like, look, you've got
18 months.
12 to 18 months, don't have to pay me, where you can bring something to the table, and if you do, you're attached. But it doesn't keep you from still going out with it also. They don't own it themselves.
Yeah.
What was the second question?
Oh, what was the percentage?
Oh, percentage. Well, really, basically, the financiers will take 50%, which is 100%. I know this sounds strange, plus their interest, right? And then you go into the back end on the top 50%. A director would normally get 5. A writer would normally get 5. If you have 50%, you kind of have to even it out. A lot of directors kind of, as producers, if they're not bringing money to the table, you kind of have to wait and see what you have left over. But if I was the producer you were coming to, I would make sure I got exactly the same as you.
So if I get 5, you get 5?
That's what I would do.
And just hold it, they could be negotiated.
I would just
later,
say, like, I will get no less or no more than you will.
Respect.
Just
They're
that.
asking for, they were asking for 15. So I'm just having
Well, then you get 15. And then that's 30. That means you only have 20% left to give out to your talent, which is not that much.
So maybe start smaller and then say, because conversations with points, especially with
Also,
indies,
15%,
can
have them bring some money to the table.
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. I would start small, maybe be like, here's 5, and let's, at the end of the conversation, because actors, you're gonna, like, there's just unforeseen things. So I would maybe not lock into 100% concrete, more like a shopping
Yeah, no,
agreement.
just do a shopping agreement.
Offer them something, but it's a little early.
But you can also do the dividing thing. Like, we had a project where it was like, okay, well, we'll each get the same amount, the director will get the same amount, and the producers will get the same amount. By the way, we would be 2 producers getting the same amount as 1 director, right? But whatever is left over after, you know, the writers and the composers, if you want to give composers, a lot of times when you're making indie movies, you're not paying people more than scale, like, but they are worth more than scale, then you want to give them back end,
You want to offer them, yeah.
you know, and if you don't sell it to a streamer, you can probably get it. So, you know.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
The business side, thank you guys.
Yeah. Hate the business side.
Hi.
Everyone.
Hi.
Hi. You guys answered a question earlier about indie television and how it's important to have somebody prominent attached to your project. So I have a 2-part question. The first part is, like, besides, I know you spoke about the importance of festivals. I wanted to know, like, what are some other good methods of getting somebody interested, a prominent person interested in your project or attached to your project? Like, would cold emailing or, like, what are some methods for that, I guess?
Knocking on their doors.
Contests.
Contests. Okay.
Contests. Film festival contests, script writing contests.
Labs, yeah.
Labs.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the great festivals have labs, do that. I mean, if there's ways to even go through agents and managers, even if it's just befriending people, it is cold emailing is really tricky. A lot of people just can't open unsolicited submissions. Agents and managers are usually the route, but I think just, doing labs and doing other things and just, you know, finding connectors to get to people.
And then my other question, I'm not sure if you guys like deal a lot with animation, but for like animated television or animated films, like what is something that catches your eye and makes you attracted to an animated project specifically?
I'm not really attracted to animated projects, but we've done a couple. But I don't know specifically there, but there are very specific animated groups and labs. I actually recently saw one. Like, I would also follow on social media. Some of the studios are doing. I guess they're kind of labs, but for women and minorities that you know are, you know, to help you get your project off the ground, or director or stuff like that, or work with that. So I would apply to all the. It kind of sucks actually, but just apply to everything.
It sucks, but if you apply to all of them,
Yeah.
then it can
And
help.
keep applying.
Yeah.
Because you can get rejected 5 times and they will still marry you.
Okay, is that your question? Yeah. I think we're gonna wrap it up with that. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you so much. All you guys are great.